Afternoon, folks. Today we have a meeting with the real estate lawyer, Andrew Cow. We've been working together for quite a while now, and maybe he can answer some questions that you have on your mind. I have a few of my own just to get the conversation going. So, Andrew, if you could please introduce yourself and maybe tell us about your experience in real estate.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Enjoy disseminating information to the real estate profession and, realtors, mortgage brokers, sometimes fellow colleagues. We exchange ideas and perceptions and perspectives on different things. But primarily my goal is to kind of help clients and prospective clients navigate through what can be a difficult and, stressful time with the biggest investment of their lives. I've been doing it now for a little over 10 years. I have a partner and own a law firm in the West End, but one of the things that differentiates me from most of my colleagues is that I'm mobile, so I can see people at their convenience, weekends, evenings, their house, their office, coffee shop, whatever works for them. I drive sometimes pretty far away to, in theory, remote places on the outskirts of Edmonton, or sometimes 60, 70, 80 kilometers out. Every summer, it seems like I end up finding myself 2 or 3 hours away from Edmonton, seeing one person, but I've enjoyed the time kind of exploring Alberta and all the things that it has to offer.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I do is just try to get involved beforehand to kind of avoid a lot of the common pitfalls and issues that we see when somebody's listing a home or looking to buy a place. And just by being involved beforehand, one, I don't charge anything, and two, it just makes things a little bit more streamlined for everybody, and we kind of avoid a lot of the issues that after the fact become difficult to undo and can be costly for either a seller or buyer. So that's a little bit about me. Sorry. Big Superman fan. I'm in my office. I'm the only person who has a wall that's painted something other than gray. So I like to keep things fun and interesting and make law accessible and understandable, because for many people it can be a little bit of legal jargon and mumbo jumbo, but we break it down. And I think most people find that my approach to law is to kind of deconstruct it and demystify what seems to be daunting and just make it a little bit more hands-on and engaging, so the person involved who's buying or selling feels a little bit more involved and empowered, whether they're buying a new property or selling their old. And we treat everybody the same, whether they're buying their 10th place or their first, or selling their 10th place or their first, because things change. Some things have been the same for the past decade of doing this, but you never know what somebody's experience level is, so we don't judge because we're only a lawyer, right?
Yeah. Well, I've been to a few meetings with my clients and yourself, and yeah, I guess it doesn't get any simpler than that. I wish my lawyer was like you when I bought my first place. So you mentioned something that you help people when they list or when they buy. So what kind of documents, let's say, you review to help to streamline the process?
Yeah, so I usually send my clients a fairly comprehensive introductory email. So we got some basic questions. You're buying a house, or sorry, I guess on the sale perspective, are you selling a house, a condo, townhouse, acreage, whatever? We look a little bit into we look into their title first off to see whether or not there's any surprises they may not be aware about, certain liens they didn't know. Make sure that they actually have enough money to sell the house, whether it be through the sale proceeds or they have the means to make up the difference. Residency is important on the sale end, because they have to be residents of Canada to sell the property without any issues. If they aren't, then there's holdbacks, and that's curtailed a lot of deals over the years. We can get into that after if you want. We take a look when somebody's selling a property at a special document that can be the bane of my existence and clients and realtors' existence, called the Real Property Report and Compliance, that you usually have to have. We can get into that as well. On the condo side, there's special documents there. We look into just simple things like location. Are you going to be here to sign the documents? And if not, how do we accommodate that? Are you married? Are you in the middle of a divorce? So there's a lot that goes into it. We talk about taxes, and then a bunch of other stuff that we can kind of get into later. On the sales side and the purchase side, we get into whether what type of property you're buying. Is it a new build or a resale? How are you paying for the place? Are you going to be here? We look at the contract into greater depth. We try to review the Real Property Report. We look at the title and see, well, is there going to be potentially an issue because maybe the seller, we can tell them the title is, underwater, so to speak, or they have a lien or a pending lawsuit. Maybe that curtails the whole deal altogether. So there's some similarities on both sides. Overall, in theory, a purchase can be more work, especially if somebody's getting a mortgage loan. But on the sale side, it can end up being a lot too if there ends up being some surprise liens and registrations and just some logistical stuff that people haven't considered before. So by getting involved beforehand, it's primarily to help the client, but selfishly, it's for me myself to make sure that there's a lot less issues that we have to deal with that ended up taking up time, but more importantly, costing the client money and then just leading to a bad experience for them overall.
Yeah, so basically both you and I, we try to explain all the documents to clients prior to, but let's say there's some disputes after the deal goes firm. How can you help clients if
Yeah,
issues like that arise?
it depends on the nature of the dispute and kind of the timing. I mean, if it's before possession, then it's got to be dealt with one way or the other. So if there's a real property report, which is again the drawing of the outside of the property showing all the structures, goes to the city or county for municipality called compliance, which is confirming everything's permitted, inspected, doesn't encroach on a neighboring or city property, so on and so forth, complies with bylaws. Sometimes the seller doesn't have that, and in the middle of ordering it, we get it a day or two before possession. Ends up being a deck problem, for example, so there's no permit. So then we got to come to a resolution as to that, whether it's going to be accepting it as is, maybe a price reduction because the client's going to take it down anyways. Is there going to be a holdback of some money until that gets dealt with? So that's usually the main issue on these deals for houses, anyways. But sometimes it can be stuff like the seller's supposed to remove all the garbage literally from their house by a certain date, and if not, then there's a holdback of some money. So we kind of navigate that. If the deal's already done and then a client finds something out after the fact on the purchase end, and then by virtue, if we're acting for a seller, the purchaser for their place finds out, leaking, bathtub, whatever the case is, depending upon the nature of it, it's either you've got to call your insurance company, you've got to weigh your options if you want to try to sue them if they don't voluntarily do it or not, or we can kind of help you to a certain degree, but we tend to not do any real estate litigation in our firm, so I'm kind of limited to what I can do. But let's put it this way: I spend a lot of time helping people before and even after their deals when I'm capable of doing so. And once they've already paid us, I'll still help them to the extent that I can without charging any more, unless it really involves some more stuff. If we decide to help them sue somebody, which you never hope to want to have happen, but there's only so much you can anticipate on both your end and my end.
Yeah.
You can do an inspection and everything's fine, and then afterwards you find out some mystery where there's a big crack in the wall that was hidden by a board that nobody knew about, or the seller on the possession day decides to steal a tree which nobody thought was going to happen, and then the person shows up at the house and the tree is gone. So that's an actual example of something that's happened before. So
Wow.
we do the best that we can to deal with these things, but practically buyers have to understand that if they don't do a walkthrough before the possession date, which most sellers don't want to allow because it can kind of open up a can of worms, even if nothing is actually nefarious going on, then we've already paid the money. The seller's lawyer's usually already given the money to their client. So then it's just kind of a matter of, let's make a deal. And if they don't want to play ball and the issue is maybe a couple $100, we can email the other lawyer and say, hey, this is what's going to happen. This is the issue. Is your client going to do anything? And they may just say kick rocks because in theory, their job's done and there's not much they can do after they give their clients the money unless their client's willing to voluntarily do something. So a lot of the things can be avoided beforehand, but sometimes things spring up and they're probably going to spring up here because every year around March, April, May, June, and if there's heavy rain in July, I start to get, emails about people moving in and then there's being like leaks in the property and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And sometimes it happens on the day of possession, right? And then it becomes, Wayne Brady, let's make a deal. In some cases, and in some cases, there's pullbacks of money and this and that. But the contract is, has been in place for a long time. It doesn't contemplate every situation.
Yeah.
And some people just don't want to follow the contract on the selling end, and they're prepared to get sued. And then it's up to a buyer if they want to sue or not. And sometimes, if it's the thing is, if they don't want to deal with the stress or the issue is not that, in theory, big of a deal or not that expensive, they may just end up having to do it themselves. If the seller intentionally did something bad, hope that karma does its thing.
Yeah. There's lots of things like material latent defects that are usually in the purchase contract. There's patent defects that are usually visible. Yeah, there's some stuff that's not discoverable through reasonable inspection that might pop up only after you move in. So yeah. So I guess for people that do not know you and say do not follow you on social media, which is top of the line and something I'm striving for. Um, with that said, you don't really only do real estate law. You also provide wills and that kind of services, right? So if you can elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, so our firm as a whole does a wide variety of areas of practice. I myself used to do, and the firm still does, personal injury, so car accidents, family law, divorces, separations, things like that. We do business law, so in corporations, buying and selling commercial real estate, or buying a franchise, setting up a franchise, things like that. We do some employment law, but my main area is myself. I could sit there and kind of calculate it, what percentage is what, but I would say the majority, 60, 70%, if not more, is real estate, and then the remainder is wills. And then I kind of do the odd business thing here and there. We have lawyers who do that a lot more than I do. So depending upon the time of the year and just the schedule and so on, and just the skill set, sometimes those things get deferred to them, like especially the family law and so on. I shouldn't do anymore. But there's an intersection between, or an interplay between a lot of those things. Like today, I had a client who's an investor client, lives in Vancouver and buying a lot of places here. He wants to incorporate his company and then use his company to buy the real estate. So we can help him with that, for example. There's times where people are going through a divorce and then selling or buying a property. So that becomes kind of sticky, because we can't play divorce lawyer when they're going, let's say they're selling a property and they're disputing what they're going to pay, or who's going to get what or whatever. We have to kind of limit it in that case to, we're helping you close the deal, and hopefully you have your own lawyers, makes it easier for everybody. If not, and you can't agree on as to how the monies are going to be divided, then we're going to be holding that money kind of in trust indefinitely, until that gets resolved. So it's valuable to kind of know how those things work, because you can kind of advise to an extent, not in a real legal rule, but just kind of advise them as to what they need to look out to and who they should be calling for the things that we can't do or shouldn't be doing, because the Law Society takes conflict of interest very seriously, including having one lawyer act for a buyer and seller at the same time.
Yeah.
And then there's also a connection between wills and then real estate as well, because anybody who owns real estate should be getting a will and a power of attorney and personal directive in place as well. And then it also becomes relevant to know that information in that area of law when you're dealing with, estate sales, or you're dealing with somebody trying to sell a house who has lost capacity and needs a power of attorney, needs to have a power of attorney in place, and whether that power of attorney is a valid one or not, because a lot of times people do it themselves, and then the document isn't worth the paper it's written on, and then the house shouldn't even be sold in the first place because they don't actually, the person trying to sell it on behalf of their parent or whatever doesn't actually have the legal authority to do so. So knowing all those different areas and having the experience now over a decade of doing so just makes it a little bit easier for myself, but more importantly, I can give more advice to clients, so that
So like you explained to me before, it's not just the will, you also need to look at power of attorney. So you need basically 3 documents, not just the one. And
there's a 3 documents, and just basically you got a will, which most people know about, but most people don't have, for better or for worse. Namely, who you're going to have manage your property when you pass away, who gets your property, if you have kids, who takes care of them, heaven forbid you pass away before they turn 18, what age do people get their share, and then if you want to be buried or cremated. So those are the 5 basic considerations. There's some more things in there about, like, do you want to give a certain item to somebody, and this and that. And then the power of attorney, he manages your property and finances while you're alive, but you're incapacitated, or you're alive and you're fully capacitated, or you're still alive and you're fully capacitated, but you just are either traveling, going away to a different country. You want somebody to deal with stuff for you here, or maybe you've lost some physical mobility and you want somebody to deal with that stuff, or you're on the cusp of incapacity with dementia, Alzheimer's, and you want to make it effective immediately. And then your personal directive, which is where you have to have no capacity, and you need somebody to make the decisions for you that are not financially based, where you're going to live, who can you associate with, can you be involved in work, activities, things like that. But more importantly, your medical decision making, hospital visits, and what type of treatment you're going to have and stuff like that. And all of that's an interplay too, and comes up to me quite frequently where people are trying to help their parents or their spouse or whatever the case is, and they're trying to sell real estate, and they want these documents done quickly. So we can accommodate that to a certain extent, but then there's some times where somebody's already in the cusp of incapacity. We've got to get a letter from their doctor saying, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Smith, or whoever the case is, actually knows, about their finances and assets and can properly actually sign these documents. So I always encourage people to get these done as soon as they can. Anybody over 18 should have it. People have certain plateaus or benchmarks, I should say, as to when they want to do it. They reach a certain degree of wealth, they get married, they have kids, they reach a certain age. Those are all kind of positive things why people would do it. Sometimes there's sadly low negative ones. I mean, their own health deteriorates, they lose someone, somebody gets in an accident, they kind of realize their own mortality. But whatever the reason is, getting it done while you can do so is going to make things a lot easier for your family and your loved ones in general. And then tying it back to real estate is going to make all of that a lot easier as well, because without having the proper documents in place, a lot of things and a lot of money has to be spent in order to actually appoint someone to have the authority to deal with your real estate. With real estate being so time sensitive, if you're trying to sell a place and it's a hot market, whatever the case is, and you've got to waste a whole bunch of money and time to try to get someone to have the authority to do that, you might lose out on a lot of money. Which maybe if you passed away already, doesn't matter to you, but you're looking down and saying, hey, I could have saved, whatever amount of money and could have given more to my family, whatever the case is. But we encourage people to do it, whether it's with us or somebody else, and it's just best for everybody.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's I think a lot of information that people didn't even realize. Well, thank you for joining me today and for the introduction and all the information you provided. Definitely very valuable. So again, Andrew Cowell with KBL Law in the West End. Great central location, transit accessible as well. So if anyone has any other questions, you can reach out to me or to Andrew, and we'll be more than glad to help you in your real estate deal.